Hello, my name is Mike Driscoll, and today I want to talk about creating consistent content. Okay, let's start from the beginning. At the beginning of my career, I wanted to be a programmer, a person who develops code with some kind of language. At the time, I didn't know which I would start with. It ended up happening to be that I did some programming with Microsoft FrontPage, but I really wouldn't call it programming per se. I'd call it more like using Word to create web pages. Anyway, eventually I got hired by a local government company or local government, and they wanted me to learn Python on the job and convert what they had in Microsoft over to Python. And so that's what I did. I learned Python for over a couple of months, and I converted their login scripts and their VBA code and other bits and bobs into Python. And Python was like the first language that fit my brain. Now, why do I bring this up? Python is what I do for content creation as well. So you kind of need to know why I started out. And the reason that this matters is that when I was learning Python on the job, I'm reading all these books and websites, and I have to figure out a way to get it stuck in my head, or I need to have a brain dump. And that's where blogging came in. So I started to blog on my own website called Mouse vs. Python, and it's been a really popular website. It's been there for over 10 years, and it's gone through a couple of different iterations. And I really liked doing it, and I could save off the stuff that I was learning onto my website, and I could make it searchable for myself so that I wouldn't forget things that I had learned. And that was great. And then what was really cool is I started getting readers. And the readers would leave comments and give me suggestions about other articles. And then I started realizing, some more articles were more popular than others. And eventually those readers encouraged me to do some book writing. And at the time I didn't really want to do that. But eventually I decided, let's try it out. I'm going to write a book, and I'm going to write a beginner's book for Python. But I wanted to make this book different than the other beginner's books. I wanted to make it the kind of book that I wanted to have when I was learning Python. And so that's what I did, and it went over really well with my readership and with lots and lots of other people. And so, after that book had been created and been out a few months, the people who read it were like, hey, you should write a follow-up book, talk about intermediate and advanced topics in it, etc. And that's how my second book ended up coming into being, because my readers again encouraged me to continue writing. So I've written several books on Python now, and I wrote a couple of other ones too. And then I realized, I could get better at writing if I actually had an editor. And before I just kind of depended on my readership to tell me, hey, you got problems in your book, and because I'm an indie publisher, I can just fix those problems, ad hoc. But it'd be really nice if I understood, am I doing this right? So I saw that RealPython was advertising for tutorial authors, and I joined RealPython as a tutorial author, and I ended up becoming a technical reviewer for them as well. And they had a really awesome editorial process, and so I got to learn more about editing and hone my skill some more as an author for them. Before I joined RealPython, though, I actually had two experiences with two different publishers, Apress and Packt Publishing. And they also helped me see why I didn't want to be published by a publisher, but they also showed me some really good ideas for improving my books. So between, the two publishers, Apress and Packt, as well as RealPython, I learned a lot of really good ideas for my own books. And so I've continued in the indie publishing business as an indie publisher. All right. So that brings us to content creation. Content creation is a broad term, and I use it to describe blogging, book writing, as well as social media. And the whole thing about it is content is really king. You need content to be able to do this. I had the blog, so I could turn a lot of those blog posts into a book, or even cut several books. Then I could take those books, and because I'd edited them, or I'd added lots of new content that wasn't on my blog, I now had articles from my book that I could turn into, or chapters from my book that I could turn into articles for my blog. And so I had this kind of circular feeding frenzy of sorts. I could take stuff from my book, put it on my blog, take stuff from my blog, put it in my books. And when I realized I could do that with Twitter, that opened up a lot of interesting ideas. I could do that with Twitter and YouTube. I could take my books and my articles and turn them into bite-sized pieces for Twitter and turn them into video tutorials for YouTube. So how do I come up with ideas? There's lots of different ways, honestly. I look at lots of different things. I subscribe to Python newsletters. I look at the analytics for Twitter and for my blog. I use Google Analytics. And all of these different analytic tools tell me which tweets are popular, which blog articles are popular. My sales data for my books tell me which of my books are popular. And that just kind of guides me in knowing what to write about next. I also subscribe to Planet Python, which is a blog aggregator, and it's really helpful for learning, what is currently going on in the Python world. Reddit has some good places to learn what's going on. I don't usually like to interact on Reddit because those particular Python subreddits, the people on there just sometimes they're super friendly and sometimes they're super not. So I just like to use it for idea generation. Occasionally I'll get ideas from books or videos on YouTube or Pluralsight or other websites that have video content. But for the most part, my ideas come from the analytics, Twitter, Reddit, and occasionally from blog articles. Okay, let's talk about my creation process. The first step is to create the outline. So for like an article, I'll create an outline for the article or a chapter and create headers and try to figure out, what all I want to cover. And then I will write the code. And the code is important because I need to have the code and or the screenshots before I write any text. So I'll get those figured out and polished to make sure they're working where I want them to work. So if I want to write code for Mac and Linux and Windows, I want to test it on all three of those platforms. Or if I don't care, I only want to test it on Windows, I just do all of that work in front. Then once I've got the code examples in my article under the headers that they belong under, then I have a really good outline, and I can take that outline of headers, code, and screenshots, and then I can write the text around that. Now, sometimes I can write a good intro, and sometimes I can write a good outro to the article before I do anything else. But you absolutely need the rest of the outline to write it well, and usually you want the outline first because a lot of good articles will have the outline in the introduction, and sometimes that they'll reiterate that introduction set of bullet points, which is the outline basically, at the end of the article too, to kind of refresh the reader about what they wrote, what they just read. This creation process applies to my articles, but it also applies to my books. So if I write a book, I will outline like the chapters. I'll write up basically a table of contents of saying this is the chapters and the chapter order and how many chapters I think I need. And then when I go to write a chapter, I will outline the chapter first with headers and subheaders, and then I'll add the code and the screenshots, and then I'll start writing the chapter. And, with practice, you start getting good at this. But this also applies to Twitter. I will create the code, and I will write up the code, and if the code has a good screenshot that goes with it, I create the screenshot too. And eventually, once I've got the code and the screenshot, or I've got both, then I can post it to Twitter or LinkedIn or wherever. Okay, so as you can see, when I started out, I was blogging a lot. So I write articles. The articles turned into books. The books turned back into articles. And those articles turned into tweets. And I probably should put on here that they also turned into YouTube videos. So the content can be manipulated and done and reused multiple ways. You can use it for articles. You can use it for books. You can use the books as articles. You can use those articles as tweets. And then you can use those tweets and recycle them because people, Twitter and, being online in general, people are on 24/7. So tweeting in the morning here in Iowa, where I live, won't reach people who are in India because they're going to bed, or Japan, or whatever. So, tweeting, I might tweet my tweet in the morning here, and then I might send out that same tweet, a week later at night, so that it hits my readers in other countries again. And so you can, mix and mash up all of that information in different ways and reuse the same screenshots with just different text. And it just works really well for generating content. Okay, so let's talk about time management. If you want to write a book, I highly recommend that you write 4 or 5 chapters and keep track of the time it took to write each of those chapters. So, let's say you took a chapter that took you 2 hours per chapter. Or it took 1 hour for one chapter and 4 hours for another. Just keep track of how long it took for each of those chapters and then average it out. And once you have the average it took to write each of those chapters, you can then estimate, how long it'll take you to write the entirety of your book. Because if you've done the outlining process and you want to do like 12 chapters, then you can figure out, this is how long it's going to take to write a book. So for me, I typically budget a week per chapter. Some chapters take longer than that, and some chapters take a lot less. But I just kind of average it out at a week. So I know that if I have 12 chapters in my book, it's going to take me 12 weeks, probably 14. Some books I have 50 chapters, and it takes me 6 months, or it could take me all year. It really depends on the book. Some books are really easy to write, and some are really hard to write. The same goes with writing an article. Some of my articles I can crank out in 20 minutes. Other articles take me hours or days. Time management, you just have to figure out what your time limit is and how hard it is to create this content. Okay, but when can you work? I personally have a full-time job. So for me, I have to find time during the day when I'm not working. Lunchtime works really well. I can create an outline at lunchtime. I can write an introduction. I could write some code up, polish the code up, take some screenshots, or I can just do idea generation at that time. Sometimes early in the morning before going to work, I can do some of that stuff too, or evenings, or you can just jot down ideas during the day. And if you don't have a full-time job and you just have a part-time job, then you have a lot more time to work on this passion of yours and just start working on content, because you need that content ahead of time to be able to start really doing stuff. Whether you want to create the books or become a Twitter fiend, either way, you need that content. You need to keep working on it. Okay, so here's my tool chain, the tools that I use to work on these different things. Most of my writing is done in Markdown for my books. So I use Sublime Text because it works really well with Markdown. And it works the same on all the platforms, so it's awesome in that respect. There are lots of other text editors you could use, though. I use Grammarly. It's super awesome because I can plug it into my browser, whether it's Firefox or Chrome, and Grammarly will, correct my writing for my articles, and it'll correct my writing for my tweets and my email. It's awesome. It's just really helpful in making sure that I don't make really dumb mistakes. And it works better than most spell checks do. I use the analytics tools from Twitter and Google for my articles and tweet ideas, like I've mentioned before. So I use that a lot. I use it heavily. I use FeedHive to do Twitter scheduling. It's really helpful for that. And I highly recommend it for that kind of thing. But I also use other tools too. So, I use my blog. I use my blog for ideas for my books. Let's go to the Grammarly website so you can see what I'm talking about. Grammarly is a free online writing assistant. So if I write a blog article like in Sublime and I want to have it checked, I can just copy and paste it into Grammarly, which has an online editor, and it can check it for me. So that's helpful. Or I can put it into my blog, which is a WordPress blog, and it'll check it in there using the browser plugin. Either way, that works really well, and it's really helpful. And like I said, FeedHive is good for scheduling that for Twitter tweets. Is your content any good? The only way to find out is to post it. So post it on Twitter, post it on LinkedIn, post it on whatever other social networks you use, YouTube, TikTok, whatever. And then use your audience feedback to get an idea. Do people like it? Are they hitting the like button? Are they subscribing? Are they giving you comments? Are they positive comments? Are they bad comments? Are they asking for more information? Some of these websites give you lots of analytics, so you can see, I have 50% readership of women in the ages, 20 to 25, or you don't have any women reading your content or watching your posts. It really depends. Maybe you need to think about that. How do you get that market? And just start throwing out ideas. For me, on Twitter, I spent like the last 6 months just throwing ideas out on Twitter, like constantly. I'll put like four to six posts per day, and I'll just throw stuff on there and see what sticks. Some of my posts do really well. Some of them get no engagement. It really depends, and you have to look at that. You have to figure out which ones did well. The ones that do well, analyze them and see if there's any like correlation. Did the one that did well yesterday do as well as the one last month? Are they the same? How are they the same? You have to figure that out for yourself, and you have to figure out what your audience is too, so that you can then generate more content that your audience will enjoy. All right, well, that covers all of the things that I do currently for my content. I'm going to include a bunch of links in this video description that will show you all the different tools that I use and the websites that I mentioned during this talk. And if you have any questions, feel free to drop me a line. Thanks so much for watching.